Hello again, Dan Alasso, Making History. Yesterday I read the Ashfield Peddler chapter of my book Peppermint Kings. It focuses on the Ranney family and especially on Samuel Ranney, the first person, as far as I can tell, to bring peppermint roots to Ashfield. The Samuel Ranney story that I tell in Peppermint Kings is oriented around his activities as a peppermint grower. But not that much is known about that, really. What we do know about Samuel is more oriented around his preemptive excommunication of the Congregational Church in Ashfield in 1834. This actually was the first thing that I discovered about him, and it remains the thing that I find the most surprising and the most historically interesting and meaningful. So I will go into a bit of detail now about how I found him and what I was looking for and what remains to be done with the information that I collected at Ashfield. I first went to Ashfield to find Dr. Charles Knowlton, the freethinker I had already discovered because reprinting his book, The Fruits of Philosophy, had caused Charles Bradlaugh and Annie Besant to be tried for blasphemy in London in 1878. So I went up to visit the Ashfield Historical Society looking for anything they might have on their infamous town doctor. They had very little. A couple of photocopies of things Knowlton had written, like his history of the recent excitement in Ashfield, which did provide a very good outline of the campaign the new minister, Mason Grosvenor, was waging against licentiousness in the town in the mid-1830s. I had already read in Post's Popular Free Thought in America, 1825 to 1850, that Knowlton had spoken several times in New York City at events organized by Robert Dale Owen and Francis Wright. And I was aware that he had been imprisoned in Boston for publishing America's first birth control manual, The Fruits of Philosophy. The ladies at the museum told me where to find both Knowlton's house, which was right on the main street, and his grave. They also suggested I check down in Deerfield at the Pecumtuck Valley Memorial Association for more information. I visited the PVMA Museum, which is adjacent to Old Deerfield Village, and I discovered a photograph of Knowlton and a lot more information on the church controversies of Ashfield. I believe, although I'm no longer 100% sure, that it was in that archive that I found the letter from Samuel Ranney to Mason Grosvenor and the Church Association, along with a whole file folder filled with notes that people had written to, quote-unquote, certificate themselves out of membership in the church. The Samuel Ranney letter, relative to some of these other notes, is in a kind of a sloppy hand and contains a couple of misspellings. The first one, I suspect, is deliberate, as Ranney misspells the minister's name as Grove Center. Ranney was 62 years old at the time, but although his handwriting is a little bit haphazard, his argument is sharp. Samuel Ranney writes, "To Mason Grosvenor, chairman of the Committee of Christ's Church in Ashfield. Sir, I received your letter of the 22nd ult containing charges against me as a member of the church of which you are pastor, which charges I am requested to take into serious consideration, and I have done so. The first charge amounts to this: a transgression of the laws of Christ's kingdom by not paying away my money to support preaching. Now, as Christ's kingdom is not of this world, and as I have no knowledge of any other world, nor consequently of the laws of any other world, you cannot be surprised that I should transgress the laws you speak of, inasmuch as I know nothing about them. I once thought that I did, but that was when I took names for things and supposed that immaterialities were realities. And as to pecuniary support, it cannot be expected I should give away my hard earning for what I consider of little or nothing worth. The second charge is a violation of my covenant vows. To this, I have only to say that the same consistency, the same honesty which required me to make these vows when I did make them, now require me to disregard them. As a man's opinions and feelings are not voluntary, not under the control of his will, but are governed by circumstances, it is the height of absurdity for me to promise what my opinions and feelings shall be at a future time. The most I can consistently do or be required to do is to avow what they are at the time being. I, therefore, this day excommunicate the Church of Christ in Ashfield for my further support and membership. And I do hereby request the chairman of the committee of said church to read this at the meeting appointed for acting upon my case. Your fellow townsman, Ashfield, May 20, 1834, Samuel Ranney. This is a remarkable letter, and I immediately knew I was holding something valuable in my hands. When I showed a copy to University of Connecticut historian Christopher Clark, he agreed and accepted my invitation to join my dissertation committee. I'm not sure if this letter made the difference. Clark is a remarkably kind and generous scholar, but it certainly didn't hurt. The language Ranney uses is not what most historians would consider typical for an old farmer living in a remote hill town in 1834 New England. Charles Knowlton, though, had written a 456-page philosophical tome called The Elements of Modern Materialism in 1829. He had actually been jailed briefly in Amherst for trying to sell a copy to a college student there. In the big picture of Knowlton's story, the elements is the philosophy of which the birth control book is the fruit. It certainly seems as if some of the ideas Knowlton had written about had seeped into Samuel Ranney's thinking about names and realities. So in a sense, the whole Peppermint Kings project was a tangent from the real original project, which was about secular radicalism in the Atlantic world of the 19th century. I actually tried writing a biography of Knowlton a few years ago, but I really think the doctor's life and times deserves a much more extensive treatment. I did use the Samuel Ranney letter in Peppermint Kings to illustrate the distinctiveness of rural mentalities in early America. I think there's more to say, too, about the Ashfield congregation's efforts to discipline and punish the townspeople at the very moment they were losing their ability to tax and compel behavior. I'll probably return to this topic soon. I also have an entire hard drive full of notes on Charles Bradlaugh, who lived from 1833 to 1891, who was the secular radical that I was studying when I discovered Knowlton in the first place. So, with a lot of luck, maybe I will have a chance to work on those, and when I do, I will report on that here. In the meantime, I hope that people found that a little bit interesting. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you again